Okay, you all heard that. You're on camera. Okay, everybody, good morning and good evening, depending on which side of the world you're joining us from. Um, Very happy, delighted, honored to host Susan Schwartz with us today, who is going to be speaking about a very important topic that is often discussed, but not in this depth and, not from this angle. So we're very happy to introduce Susan today. For those of you who do not know Susan, Susan E. Schwartz trained in Zurich, Switzerland as a Jungian analyst and is also a clinical psychologist and member of the International Association of Analytical Psychology. She presents to numerous Jungian conferences and teaching programs in the US and worldwide. Susan has articles in several journals and chapters and books on Jungian analytical psychology. Her current book, published by Routledge, is translated into several languages and into Ukrainian this April. It is entitled The Absent Father Effect on Daughters, Father Desire, Father Wounds. Another book will be published by Routledge in 2023, this year, entitled The Imposter Syndrome and the As If Personality in Analytical Psychology, The Fragility of Self. Her Jungian analytical practice is in Paradise Valley, Arizona, and her website is susanschwartzphd.com. Susan, it is a great pleasure and honor having you with us. And without further ado, I'm going to invite you to take the floor. So if you would like to share your screen, you should be able to do that right now. It's already enabled. All right, yeah, we can see it.
You can, good.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. All right, got it?
Uh-huh, perfect.
Great. So thank you so much for having me. And I will just go into the material straight away. So in the process of my speaking and our discussing, I'd like us to think about, what does absence really mean? And what form does it take? And I'll begin with a quote from Sartre, who says, "I now exist as myself for my unreflective consciousness. It is this eruption of self which has most often been described. I am myself because somebody sees me." So we might question, how does a father dream of his daughter? Here is a father. Here is a dream of a daughter. The father is like Hitler. He had 3 daughters. One was suicidal. She is under his thumb. Myself and another sister cry as she will kill herself, and he does not care. She is a poet. He trashes her work. She ate glass. He will not change. As Jung said, but there is a darker side of the father, sometimes negatively stretching out toward his children, active in the disturbing Greek myth concerning Kronos and his attempt to devour Zeus. I must say also at the beginning, this is centered very much on a darker side of the father-daughter dynamics. I just want to be clear about that, because it doesn't portray too much sweetness. The repressed and neglected insist on being known. It means addressing the deficits that have neglected parts of the personality, so the self-regulation of the psyche can begin to attend for healing. So I use this quote from Murray Stein, Jungian analyst, because so many daughters that I see in my practice have learned to negate the damage from the father. They will make excuses. They say, well, he was there when I was little, and he was really sweet. And then what happened? And they make an excuse and say, he's introverted, or he's shy, or he doesn't know what to do. And they do not know how to say, and I was hurt by that, partly because of what they learn from the father, part of what they learn from society and their own particular culture, and part of that is what we are told, that the fathers get off the hook and do not get to be participants in family life. I want to give you an example of from a poet named Ingrid Jonckers. I don't know if you know of her. She lived in South Africa and wrote a poem called The Child Who Was Shot Dead that was read by Nelson Mandela when he was made prime minister. So here is just a bit of the poem. The child raises his fists against his father in the march of the generations who scream Africa, scream the smell of justice and blood in the streets of his armed pride. Ingrid Jonckers walked into the water and committed suicide. Her father said about her, "They can throw her back into the sea for all I care." It's an example of an extreme of the absent father. So although it is oftentimes purported that father and daughters are a love romance, it oftentimes is unrequited. This is about actually the needs that a daughter has for her father, causing a great deal of distress when he is not there. As we were speaking just before we began, the effects are on the body, mind, and the soul. We carry effects from absence. The question is, do we realize it? And too often, what happens when there is absence is we don't find a relationship to it. So whatever is father and whatever he represents to each of us, we don't learn how to relate. We might learn how to accept, we might learn how to compensate, but we don't learn how to use the energy. The daughter is one of the female archetypes in need of exploration to foster individual and collective healing. So I'm bringing up this topic again for us as individuals, but also for our cultures, because this is a topic that has actually not been explored very much. You know, until about the last 30 years, there was hardly anything written on fathers and daughters, hardly anything written on fathers, much less on fathers and daughters. And I would also say that someone that I was speaking to, a Jungian analyst, said, why did you write a book on fathers and daughters? There's already three books written on fathers. Just 3? I said, that's why. Only 3. So there's a lack that actually we have all gone along with. This picture is to portray one of the effects of the absent father, and that is the puella. The one who remains young, not young in that healthy, wonderful, energetic, creative way, but young as in immature. Lovely, always kind of trading on being diminutive, but not being the strength that she is. This is another image of puella, where she's trading on her being, her image, but the question is, where is herself? Where is the inner of her? Is she in disguise, is what I'm saying. The failure in the paternal holding environment can result in the narcissistic response. This is often based on insecurity, as one is maladapted to life's trials and tribulations. Life with others is uneasy, as without foundations, one feels flawed. By the narcissistic response, here I mean singularity. When you actually read the myth of Narcissus and Echo, who usually is not paid much attention to, it's a myth of singularity. There is no union. So what happens is that the daughter will keep it all inside and will not really be able to connect in an easy way. So one of the things about the father, of course, these are a couple of images of fathers that I just picked out because they don't look too approachable and they don't look too friendly, is why I picked them up, because I think there's something that has sadly been very distant for all these fathers. They never learned how to relate because where were their fathers? So this is by another Jungian analyst, Aldo Cartenuto. He was Italian. The primary context in which betrayal is experienced is the family, for it's there that the first love pact is sealed, a pact that menaces and at the same time makes possible individual biological development, behavior. So this is where we learn love and betrayal is in the family. And here I'm saying, certainly with the father. So I want to give you an example of someone that this picture reminds me of. A woman whose father left when she was 3. And she and her mother moved to another country. This is a very brief little example. And the father had made no contact, made no overtures, tried to reach out to the daughter. This is sadly not untypical. And she grew up. When she was a teenager, she contacted him. Again, a very typical response. The daughter reaches out to the father. She found him. He responded. She thought, oh my goodness, we are great together. We are alike. And then, of course, he disappeared again. And in her life, she was in love with one of her first loves, really love, and married somebody else. It's a rather tragic story. And all of her life, she had a recurrent dream, like this picture, mechanistic. On one side of it was her, and on the other side was the man she really loved. And in the dream, she could never get to him, constantly frustrated. And of course, she's married to another who she doesn't really love. And the dream reoccurs to tell her, are you going to really ever reach out and be with your love? And I'm not saying that it's only the father that causes this. I want to be clear. It's just a focus on the father here. And this image as well, to me, is like this woman, where the father or the central male figure is very pale, and the women are all turned away from him in the picture. He doesn't look to them, and they don't look to him. And to me, it was like this woman that I was just speaking about, this lack of connectedness, warmth, feeling of welcome, home. This also a father who feels rather distant, maybe self-involved, maybe not able to relate. You know, I don't know if you know this, but the history of psychoanalysis from Freud, he did not have a good relationship with his father and felt his father never understood him. And Jung as well. Both of them, around the age of 13, became disillusioned with their fathers. They both took the angst from the disillusionment and used it to develop their qualities. But the history of the whole psychoanalytic and analytic depth psychological movement is based on men who were not close to their fathers. And Jung had 4 daughters and wrote one essay on fathers, one, in which he did not mention his daughters. The absence of a father sets a child up for anguish and disappointment, often canceling her creativity and life force. Endeavors are replaced, stamped with depression, anxiety, and disturbed relationships. I want to say one other thing in relation to what this says. The absence is something which seeks to be filled. So as we have experienced absence, it equally calls to us to fill it. Pay attention. Find your creativity. Find your life force. We are charged in a way with that emptiness and absence to fill it. And the question is, how are we going to fill it? This is an image that to me represents this kind of internal breaking up that can happen, that often sends people into therapy or into a creative endeavor or into something which has to deal with the chopped upness inside or the feeling of being in pieces or maybe seeing the world in a split kind of way. So 2 things, the absence causes and brings about shatteredness and feeling fractured and dissociated. But those also bring, let's put the pieces together. So it goes on one side and back to the other. How will we put the pieces together? A daughter who senses that the father cannot tolerate any psychological separateness will attempt to create a state of mental fusion, a projective identification as a means of communication. She tries to please him as the adored darling. And in this, I want to give you an example of Virginia Woolf, British author, famous in the mid-20th century, magnificent in many ways. This is how I would give you an experience that she describes with her father, which is that she is sitting across from him at dinner, and she just knows today he's more depressed than he had been, and he would like her to go for a walk with him or go somewhere with him. This is all unsaid. This is all what she's picking up, mental fusion. She's picking it up underneath. And so she complies and she goes along with, and she pleases her father so that he will be happier and not so depressed. Mental fusion. And this is what she said about her father. It was the tyrant father, the exacting, the violent, the histrionic, the demonstrative, self-centered, self-pitying, deaf, the appealing, the alternately loved and hated father that dominated me. Pretty powerful. This could look like a rather sweet image of a father and daughter, but is she complying with him, or is he listening to her? It could go either way. Depends. And this is another image of what I had called the puella. You know, the woman who really never finds herself, we could say. And this is a picture to remind us that these issues are transgenerational. They go throughout the generations. That's why I mentioned Freud and Jung and how they raised their children and how our fathers raised us and how their fathers raised them. And where was ever the expectation or the room for the father to participate in the family? It was not expected at all. And even now, you could question yourself, how many of your friends or yourselves, where is there the situation where the father helps out rather than as equal, and we are. And one other thing I want to say about the father. Fathers are not always male. So we just expand that. I'm just using them, but with the recognition that the partnership can be of many forms. But that father figure, is he emotionally, unrelatedly involved? And that's the question. And is he involved from the beginning of life? Is he there absolutely when that baby comes through and really present? Better? I don't think enough really, but better. And this is a very sad and again, too common, where there is a separation between the parents. The father is preoccupied and distant. Sometimes he is preoccupied with work, sometimes with drugs, sometimes with alcohol, sometimes with other friends, sometimes with himself. But at any rate, and he might be absent emotionally, he might also be absent physically. He might be absent from himself. The question is, how much has that absence impacted on our lives? So one of the effects is that, as Jung says, they withdraw, one doesn't really grow up, withdraw from life, remain fixed in nostalgia, with little relationship. The negation of life's fulfillment is synonymous with the refusal to accept oneself. Both indicate not wanting to live, and not wanting to live is identical with not wanting to die. In other words, one remains in between, not really hooked in life and not really able to develop. So this is amazing, not amazing. It always happens. Before I give a presentation on this, just today, someone had a dream in which there was the absent father. And as a result of the absent father, the comment in the dream was, my feet were not on the ground. And that's what I was referring to by that quote from Jung. My feet were not on the ground. To me, this is how young the desire begins. I want and I need my father. And this, a picture, we have to have maybe a couple of a father who looks like he's paying attention. He's with his daughter. Will he continue this? We would hope so. In Jungian psychology, we could say, we could talk about the father archetype, but maybe that's a little too obvious. Maybe we want to go and say, what does that archetype or that figure, what did I learn about it? What did I integrate? Where has it left me? And has it left me like this image, which is alone, nothing to hold onto, something crumbling? Maybe the old definitions of what a father is are crumbling. Maybe they're changing. Crumbling in order to grow, not crumbling for destruction, but crumbling to grow and change. What she sacrificed to remain in this attachment with her father, as it really meant betraying herself and staying daddy's girl, because she could not cope with the power of mother and her threat as the other female. She avoided the whole situation by leaning into the father. So even though we are focused on the father and the more negative side, there is what does the daughter give up to stay with the father or to keep her illusions and idealizations of him, and to keep, it's almost like propping him up, and then what happens to her and her own identification with her mother, and can she? And again, a rather sweet image that we would hope might happen. Maybe there would be a reflective father who might evaluate and examine, who am I? How did I learn to be a father? What is going on? This picture is an example of another person I have worked with who every day did exactly what this little girl is doing in the picture, which is that she waited for her father to come home. And every day when he came home, he would like give her a tiny hug and then go off into his room. Every day she hoped he would be there. Every day he would not. And she spent her life being disappointed. She had a dream in which she was on a treadmill and she fell off the treadmill and had blood on her arms. As she looked down, then she saw her father's shoes. And then she looked up and she saw her father. That was the end of the dream. And I said, "Did he help you?" And she said, "Oh, I never thought about it." And I said, "You never thought about asking your father for help?" And she said, "No, because he didn't and he wouldn't." That's part of the meaning of this little girl and this little one also. And these little ones, how do they grow up? And we could ask, are they a part of us? Again, we hope there would be love and connection, even in the midst of all this. And there is some. There is some. Always there's some. Well, not always. Not always. This little one tells us there isn't. She's sad and quite upset. And the question is, where does the upset go? And does it recede into the unconscious somewhere, rattling around? Here is Jung. The things which have the most powerful effect upon children do not come from the conscious state of their parents, but from their unconscious background. So if the father never learned to be a father, here's the unconscious background. And what did he learn about daughters? And more than that, when a daughter turns 12 or 13, 10, her body changes. How does the father react? How many stories have I heard of once she starts to develop, he pushes her away. She has no idea why. She doesn't know. He doesn't tell her because he's unconscious. He doesn't know how to say, you know, you're really becoming quite lovely. I'm so pleased for you. No, his feelings take over and he can't manage it. This is a picture. So I wanted to bring in with this a little Jungian terminology, and that is the feminine and the masculine, or the anima and the animus. The animus as a masculine figure is very debated in Jungian psychology now because of how Jung described it very negatively, very negatively. But here we have the female, and behind are two figures. Could they be male? Could they be female? Could they be both? Could they be either or? It's that, what are we carrying inside question? And how do we carry the feminine and the masculine? And how did we learn that from our fathers? So I want to read you something that a woman wrote just about this. She says, the man and woman looked at each other, searching for signs. Are they willing or not to face the truth of the drama? By this time, they knew they were in it together. Each wondered at the courage of the other, the fragility of the other's mind. Each was tempted to stay and suffer the unfolding. For a moment, their eyes met once more, but doubt possessed them. Courage and desire deserted. They turned, walked out, and said goodbye. Neither ever knew what the drama was really about or what truth could have been theirs. In other words, they never united. They stayed alone, and perhaps as desolate within as this picture. Very desolate, without connection, no joy, black and white, very distressing. This, again, the hope for the reflection. You know, one of the things about looking at the darker side is it's so focused on one side because it's been so focused on this other kind of more romanticized story that we all need to really reflect. What fits for me? What is appropriate for me? And have I been living like this image? Kind of a fenced off place, looks a little broken down, needs some work, quite ornate and lovely. But is that a picture of what is going on inside? Is that what one inherits? Something, and of course, we do inherit something that needs work. So, yes. So here Jung says, of course, it's not possible for parents to have no complexes at all, but that would be superhuman. But they should at least come to terms with them consciously. They should make it a duty to work out their inner difficulties for the sake of the children. In other words, part of that refers to what kind of a father complex have we inherited and do we have ourselves? How is it manifested? How do we use the energy? How does it run our lives unconsciously? And what really were the messages that the father is giving the daughter? Unconscious and conscious. Takes time to figure it out. This is an image by Van Gogh that I thought was so, maybe this is how fathers feel. Some of them so bewildered and so depressed and so at odds, not really knowing what to do. And this is a picture because I think it's important that we consider all cultures, different cultures, because the father in one culture is going to be having a different role in another culture. And we really need to know, so what is your background? And what was expected? And what was that father? And what was that daughter? Because it's going to be very different. And unless we recognize that, we're kind of chopping off our personality and making it too narrow. And this again, a young girl, but rather in rags. And imagistically, internally, many people feel at rags, even though they have told themselves they had a sweet father and he loved them. Concretely, they have very little to show for it. And they've made up a lot of stories. And the sadness is they peel off the stories and they find the truth. But really in it, they find the truth of themselves. One has to face the desolation in order to find out what else is there. It's that process that one goes through psychologically where you strip off the illusions and you see, oh my, empty buildings. And then you see, how can it be reconstructed? And that's the part of the inner work, is the reconstruction. And maybe creating better images and maybe also passing on to all the people that we interact with different images, different questions. So this is from Andrew Samuels. He's a British Jungian analyst. What kind of damage results from the exclusion of physicality from the daughter-father relationship? Her father's inhibition in handling her, or more so, his absence, cannot help but effect the formation of a positive attitude towards her own body, a sense of its rightness, beauty, power, and integrity. He affects her sexuality and also how she makes contact with the grounds of her own being. Here he's speaking about the right kind of sexuality between a father and a daughter, the appreciation, the development, but too often that sexuality has become abuse. Too often those are the stories that we hear. We don't really hear the daughter being apprised by her father for her beauty, her power, and integrity. It really takes something, because our cultures do not exactly promote this. There still is, I think, in the unconscious, the father that will stay away and not know how to appreciate the daughter. I want to read a dream to you of a woman who, this is a repetitive dream, and it occurred for 30 years or so. It's a long time to have a repetitive dream. And I would say whenever you have a repetitive dream, pay attention, because the dream is telling you that you're not. So here's the dream. She dreamt her father put his hand on her thigh so forcefully it burned her flesh to the bone. Branded, she could not rise against the resistance of his hand. Later, she thought about filling the wound with concrete. How could this wound heal? Concrete would make her flesh inflexible, heavy, and non-human. So the dream says that her father gave her a father wound. She is now branded as his. That's what branding does. She said the dream as if she was reading a grocery list. There was no emotion. That was part of the problem. She didn't register any horror because the image is horrible. She had no rage, no upset, no desire for anything different. Her dream, although very personal, I would ask, is it not collective as well? Intimacy, and then I'm going to go on a little bit here. Intimacy exposes what are the tattered shards of the personality and endangers the safety of one's insulated world. One describes a vacuous space at the center, as if nothing was there. The woman's dream, you could say, did the branding take away her center, and she couldn't find it, as if nothing was there. The I Ching says, if you look in the I Ching, under hexagram number 18, it is called corruption, work on what has been spoiled or decay. And throughout it refers to setting right what has been damaged by the father. So throughout history, the I Ching is very old. This has been going on. It's not a new story at all. When a daughter cannot exist safely and independently in the eyes of the father, it can bring about a dissociative denial of her self-agency, a denial of self in relationship, and fear of love. And that's like that woman's dream. Fear of love, fear of herself, fear of relationship. And again, small child, because this is where it begins. Sylvia Plath, another woman who killed herself, her father died when she was 8. So I don't want to say that when a father dies, when a child is young, it means that they will kill themselves. However, there is an effect. More than that, what I think the effect was, he was a very rigid father. He said, I will play with you 1/2 hour a day. That is it. And that's all it was. Rigid, like this. And that, to me, is what had a huge effect. So she writes in her journal, you remember that you were his favorite when you were little, and you used to make up dances to do for him as he lay on the living room couch after supper. You wonder if the absence of an older man in the house has anything to do with your intense craving for male company. I don't know if you're familiar with her at all, but she did write a rather hostile, angry, full of pugnacious words called daddy. And from that, what she wrote in the journal to writing that latter poem a couple of months before she died tells an incredible story. This is an image counter to what I have just said, which is the father that passes on to the daughter something sweet, tradition, rituals. Without such conscious attention, the parental imagos will exert an influence, often baneful, on relationships, romantic prospects, choice of marital partner, marital success or failure, let me add career, a host of significant areas of life. It is amazing how many times Jung refers to the influence of the parent throughout his collected works. It's really something. So let me just go on a little bit and then we will have Q&A. I also refer to a man named Andre Green, who is a French psychoanalyst, and he came up with the concept of the dead mother effect, but his followers have extended that to the dead father effect. And what that means is the depression of the father, or the withholdness within of the father, or the unconsciousness of the father creates a similar deadness and unconsciousness in the daughter. Without a nurturing paternal figure, this is the dead father effect, she can be susceptible to invasion by negative images. The child might identify with an insufficient father or one completely absent. He does not mirror a range of helpful masculine or feminine energy. When he cannot fulfill his child's need for love and affirmation, self-denigrating habits and moods abound. I want to get to one more quote and then we will, I'm just going to go through a few of these images till I get to my quote, sorry. And then we will have the Q&A. I don't have time to really go into all of these, but they're images of absence. And of course, they are my images of what absence looks like. So here we will end with this. Why are all these dolls falling out of the sky? Was there a father? Or have the planets cut holes in their nets and let our childhood out? Or are we the dolls themselves, born but never fed? And this is from Anne Sexton, an American poet, same time, in mid-century as Sylvia Plath, and another woman who killed herself. So I want to end on that rather interesting note, but also with the caveat that all creative, marvelous writers or people and who have absent fathers do not all kill themselves. So there is that as well. So we would hope that we take from all of the darker, difficult side and fill the absence. So, shall we have some questions?
Thank you so much, Susan. This was brilliant. And to sort of comment on the note that you ended with, if we don't make the unconscious conscious, then it will call itself fate. It will take over and call itself fate. So yes, not all great poets whose fathers walked out on them would end up killing themselves. But I just love how you related this really important issue with cultural manifestation. So from Ingrid Jonckers to Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, even Van Gogh. So thank you so much. I mean, this wasn't just about the psychology behind things, but you really helped to shed light on how it is culturally reflected in so much around us. So it has been a great pleasure and honor, and I cannot recommend Susan's book enough. I read it a few months back, and it's a brilliant book. So Susan, you may also want to just leave a link down in the chat box, or I can do that for you, in case anybody would like to purchase the book and have a look at it. And now for the Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to the lovely Sarah Norton, who will be taking care of the questions and all the comments that you might have. So over to you,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Thank you, Rula, and thank you so much, Susan. This was a really fascinating presentation. I loved how you pulled the dreams into it too, to really get those images flowing in this group, and overall, just such an interesting review of all these different ideas. And I know that we will have a lot of questions and comments sparked here, I would hope. So if anyone wants to either type a question into the chat or just raise your hand and you can unmute yourself and ask it, or a comment that you have, feel free. So I do see that we do have a comment from earlier from Hedy that says, quite arresting notion about the threat of the other female. It is often overlooked.
Oh, I think that is a good point. Part of the dynamic that's interesting, that of course I didn't have really time to go into, but it is a dynamic that of the mother and the father, and what I'm going to add to that comment a bit. And what did the mother inherit or learn about fathering? And how much does she relate with the father parent and show a connection? And how much does her connection with the fathering parent, how solid does she feel in it? Because why would there even be threat? You see, and there is. So it's like, we get into then the whole dynamic of the family. Where is it solid? Who is reaffirming of love? Who is supporting growth and development? Who wants change? And does the mother, if the daughter leans into the mother, well, no, she leans into the father, then she's preserving the mother and the father in a very strange way. Think about it. It's a strange, I don't want to use this word literally, but it's kind of a strange incestuous setup. So that who's with whom is not freely given. It's not freely allowed. And it's almost by default, where do you get the love? So the daughter can't really get the love from the father or from really the mother, because both of them are probably kind of fragile inside themselves as well. So if we peel one interaction, we automatically will fall into others. So it's not just one thing, even though I kind of narrowed it. I do go into more detail in the book involving the mother, etc. But the reason also I did not is that there has been so much information on mothers and how they raise their children, and very little on fathers and how they raise their children. So I almost had to go over and qualify it to bring up something that was even somewhere where mothers are not told they did the wrong thing. It happens too frequently. Culturally, it's still there, is it not? I mean, we encounter it all the time. Yeah, that was a good comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hedy. It's so fascinating to think about how all of these family dynamics weave together in that way. And I was really surprised to hear you say that there are only 3 books on this father relationship. It seems like a real absence. in
Well,
itself.
yes, let me clarify. In Jungian psychology, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. But in psychological literature, not too much. More now, but really not too much, and not until about the last 30 or so years, because it was automatically assumed that it's the mother who does the whatever. And then the father is fine because he brings home money. It's very old stereotype. But think about it. How many people do you know that still are in that stereotype, still caught in it? And to get out of it, it is not easy to get out of, really. I mean, if you're really going to do it. So, yeah. The other thing is that I think, and this was in some of the pictures, I think it's important to feel the pain and the loss and the absence so it can be repaired. You can't repair anything until you realize that you feel broken. So you have to go through that kind of desolation and that gate that looked kind of miserable and in need of help in order to go, okay, I'm going to get the help that I need so I can figure this out. And so I can separate from what I learned. I mean, we sometimes have learned the wrong thing. And also what you said, Rula, earlier about the culture, that's why I brought it in. We are not just isolates in our little world. We live in a culture, and it comes at us all the time, even more with social media, of what is promoted, what you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do, etc. And we are bombarded. And how do we find our own particular way through it? And still, if you look closely, the stereotype and the old stereotypes are still in effect. How much have they changed? They have, but they also haven't. They've been going on for so many years. They're not going to change overnight. Yeah. So culture is very important because it is partly where we learn how to be who we are and what to expect from a father. What to expect. How many people expect nothing? They buy it. Yeah.
Yeah. So true. And so much work to do, I think. We have a question in the chat. Please, may I have your opinion / thoughts with regard to a woman unconsciously choosing a husband whom is very like her father? It's from Lisa.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. We all do it in some way or another. The question is what sense we make of it. And if we find that, in fact, that has happened, okay, figure out why, what occurs, how there will be communication, which is different. What were you missing? Because if you find someone who's just like your father in difficult ways or absent, not present, not understanding, how are you going to be able to deal with it? And are you going to? And is dealing with it leaving? Is it getting into therapy? Is it learning better communication skills? Is it examining one's life as to how you got there, where you want to go? It's a part of life. You can see it in your dreams. So, the dream that I read at the very beginning about the father that was like Hitler, you could say, maybe that wasn't an outer figure. That was an inner figure. So, you might even marry somebody or be with somebody who's not supposedly like father, but you might have him inside of you. So in any way, you want to be able to look inside. And marrying someone like your father or partnering with someone like your father, they could be same sex. It doesn't matter. They could still be like your father. And then being able, it's like it heightens the awareness. Now I really have to pay attention straight in front of me all the time. So what I'm saying is, it can be a difficult situation, which can lead to greater understanding. We never go to trying to understand when we are completely content. It's such a paradox. We need a bit of a push to find ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm assuming a very helpful answer. Maybe we'll get a comment back from Lisa, but I think Cassie, you have your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you. Sorry if you can hear my dog snoring. Hi, Susan. I'm not sure it's much of a question, but just a lot of what you were saying resonated with me, even though I would consider my father as somebody who is overly present. So I don't know if you have comments on that the father is so present that the daughter is absent. I don't know how that kind of ties in with what you were saying.
It does actually. I didn't phrase it that way. I'm glad you brought it up. So I'm going to ask you, you can think about it, but is that what brings about a puella? The one who doesn't really have to stretch herself. She stays rather sweet, kind of naive at times. I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying to think about it, because the overly present father, he gives her not enough confidence, perhaps, is a bit too overwhelming. Not authoritarian always, but his way always looks best. And it can diminish one's own sense of strength, confidence, self-agency. So you might think about that, and thank you for bringing in the over-present father, because what is absent is this kind of mutuality between daughter and father. There's a sense of not equality, but we that gets missed when it's he and then you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we have, oh, well, let's see, Lisa responded. This was a very interesting answer, Susan. Many thanks. And we've had a lot of people with wonderful comments about how much this lecture has meant to them and how much they've appreciated it, that they've had to leave us because of prior commitments. But
I don't know if you want to have more comments, or I will just read, because I think we are almost at our time. I just want to read you one other quote, and this is by a French philosopher, Michel Foucault, and he says, "From the idea that the self is not given to us, I think there's only one practical consequence. We have to create ourselves as a work of art." Yeah,
beautiful.
it's lovely, isn't it?
Yes, and so poignant to this group, especially with the focus on creativity and all of this. Yeah, perfect closing. Thank you so much, Susan. This has been really, really interesting.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for all your comments. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was really very illuminating, and in a way also inspiring, and changing the way that we look at things, and actually looking deeper into them. So thank you. And thank you so much, Sarah, for taking care of all the questions. And now we're going to have a little open mic and see who would like to read poems or show some images or any other forms of art that they would like to share with us today. Cassie and Gottfried, no poems today?
I do. I want to just like jump in there, but I do, if that's okay. I have one that I thought I have one that's fitting for the subject.
Lovely.
And just a little context. I don't really often write with any intention of subject, but this is very intentionally a father poem. And it's called Idol's Eyes. Within a Daedalian temple I had lived, sleep-wandering corridors flanked by marble statues, silently cast in specious sunlight. I found your face in each of them, in your opposites, in your reflections. Seeking categorical acceptance, but alabaster idols' eyes were turned backwards and couldn't see me, empty of recognition, rolled in on their own perceptions. Unlike your eyes, where I was the pupil, projected and moulded by the shadowed kiln of your figurine aspirations. I remained like wet clay in disembodied hands, temporarily sculpted, intermittently torn down, reduced to formlessness, and reshaped in accordance with illusions disguised as illuminations, blinded by the whites of their eyes, lost in the darkness of yours. In this martyr maze, not knowing I was misplaced, till I fell out unregarded. But rather than escaping, I unfind myself at the beginning of a threaded spool, not knowing who I am, who I was, who I am. Screaming your altar slab into marmoreal pieces, your masked effigy reduced to extinguished bull-headed star rubble. So you are now a dried up clay pot I keep in a box next to the mirror on my dressing table, with your borrowed maxims I handled as scripture. I look upon them on occasion, hold these relics of my upbringing in magnolia hands, these flaking, shrinking, greying crock and faded pages that burn up in my cool palms like psalms of deadwood will one day be a pile of dust, and I will scatter you like ashes to the cloudless grape of Cretan winds. Thank you.
Beautiful. That
Thank
was just beautiful, Cassie. Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you. And Gottfried, are you with us? Maybe not now. Okay. Well, we've got Lisa and Mariana. Would you like to share anything with us today? Nothing. How about Sarah? No. Well, then maybe I can share a poem. Let me just see which one. I'll read something from the okay, this one is called A Trickster Triangle. Well, thematically, it relates, of course, obviously to the trickster archetype, and it's from my collection Simply Being. And here it goes. Because we travel into the past at a fleeting split second per millennia, we see the people of 2,000 yesteryears again today. Our recurring trio on stage wears masks of strength, cleanliness, and fidelity. There was a man named Caesar, grand and august, and we still give unto him what is his. He wears the bay leaves of self-proclaimed godliness. The other man, Pilate, looks decent and clean. We even saw him wash his hands. Got nothing on that innocent lad, or so he said. He wears a taintless shirt. There was also a Judas, friend and follower, overambitious, a good bargain of a chap, worth 30 silver chunks. He seals with a kiss. Here they remained, dancing the triangle, reappearing in different places, forms and variations of purity or lack thereof. Never gone tricksters, they wear bay leaves, clean shirts, and kisses, only to remove them, teaching us that not all that glitters is gold. It can also be 30 pieces of silver, for example. Not everything washed is sterile, and it only takes one moldy embrace to rot the dozen. Euripides repeats, often a noble face hides filthy ways. This was a story of long ago, yet way too young to be old. For once upon a Caesar, always upon a Caesar. We continue to sacrifice the lamb and choose the thief, crucify him, and they blame it on the hordes, but never on the clean hands. So it also has the theme of recurrent toxic masculinity and lots of allusions to the crucifixion scene and Jesus and the deception that happened back then. And also, probably from the heart of the season, since it's almost Easter now, that of sharing this poem. So, one last call for sharing art and poetry. Nobody? Cassie, would you want to read something else?
Yeah, I can do.
All right.
Something a little less confessional. Yeah, let's find something. Just a short one then. Is one, it doesn't have a title. There's a whale song in the blue of your petaled wrists, a secret not even the gods can hear. Should I spoon you opal mouthfuls of moon rot, would you become the dream of a crow? Or would we rain a new cosmogony? Weariness chalks wheezy feathers of the preceding hour and curls in the corners of stories. Where do you live, if not in the roomiest of suns, in tomorrow of yesterday morning? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassie.
Yeah.
And once again, I want to thank everybody who was able to join us here. We had lots of comments that people had classes and work and things, so not many of us are here right now, but I want to thank everyone. And Susan, especially, thank you so much for sharing some wonderful ideas and images with us today. I've put down the link in the chat box, so if anybody would like to have a look at it, it's right there. And Sarah, thank you so much for being a wonderful and most gracious host also today. And we look forward to seeing everybody in our forthcoming workshops, conferences. There are lots of things going on with the LABRC. First up tomorrow is a poetry workshop with Anthony Anaxagoru, who will be talking about transcending traumas through writing poems. We also have the call for presentations, the call for proposals for our iconography conference, which is coming up this May. So the deadline for the proposals is on the 10th of April. If anyone would like to submit any papers or proposals about iconography, archaeology, anything that has to do with responding to divine art and what it tells us archetypally, what it manifests and what it shows. We also are going to have our first Psychreative conference, which will take a hybrid format, and that will be in London on June 10 and 11. We haven't announced that yet, so this is the first time we talk about it here. Hopefully it'll be up on the website by tomorrow. So we'll be sharing that on social media and of course on the newsletter, the LABRC newsletter. So the theme will be the creative psyche. Quite broad, quite all-encompassing because of all the lovely topics that we've been talking about for the past 2 years through Psychreative. And, we would welcome papers from different disciplines and different ideas, of course. So it'll be held in London at the AJA Center, so the Association of Jungian Analysts Center, and this is in Camden, London. And of course, everybody is also welcome to join us online. And with that, I would like to say have a great evening or a great day. And we'd love to see you again very, very soon.
Thank
So
you.
have a lovely one.
It was delightful.
Bye.
Thanks so much. That was
Thank you
excellent.
so much,
you.
Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.